Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to talk about what ultimately I think we need to do going forwards. And by we, I mean European, UK, Western folk. We're obviously at the precipice of civilizational collapse. What do we need to do to climb back out into the light and out of the chaos of the abyss? Not to sound too dramatic. There's a well-known meme you'll probably be familiar with on the internet that goes like this: which way, Western man? Now, the nature of the internet being what it is, everything kind of just gets rehashed, consumed, and ultimately degraded into a kind of ironic pastiche of itself. Now, that meme is just kind of like a tired trope. It's lost all its meaning by being reused in kind of contrived and unoriginal ways. The mere fact that it gets repeated and memeified dilutes its potency. But back to the point, which way, Western man? Was originally posed as a serious question, which was essentially this: that European man was facing a split in the road and faced a grand choice. The way this question was asked to effectively the eternal normie was, do you want to live in a world wherein you and your children are going to be increasingly seen as basically just manifest devilry, and ultimately become a minority in the land of your ancestors, a snivelling kind of cowardly wretch whom has abandoned his history and therefore future just for nothing? Or will you stand for them, your culture, your own people, and the future that has been bequeathed to them from your past kindred, and not just leave it to the sharks? All postmodern irony aside of the meme itself, Western man does ultimately face a choice. There is the abyss, in the Spenglerian sense, the decline of the West, Normiland, Globo Homo, deracinated wilderness. Or there is what was imagined by our ancestors, a gleaming oasis of a green and verdant future for their descendants, and as seen in our greatest literature, in Chaucer, in Canterbury Tales, in Tolkien, the magical Lothlorien, the mystical Rivendell. Seems like an easy choice, but unfortunately it requires having a backbone, a sense of fortitude, honour. You're going to have to face the enemy, at least to an extent, people that hate you, and you might have to stand up to them. People that have global institutional power at their fingertips, at the click of a button, of which they wield with a grim, vindictive, censorious intention, its power with wanton, kind of gleeful abandon. You're going to have to stand up for yourself, and most people don't want to do that. The risks are just perceived as being too great. But what if there was a way that had light at the end of the tunnel, where there's a chance, maybe a different way forward? Perhaps it isn't just a binary choice, a fork in the road. Maybe there is a way that goes somewhat diagonally here, not just left or right in the conventional sense. Ultimately, the way this ends is we destroy the one ring of power. We cast it into the flames of Mount Doom, wherein it is unmade. But we're a long way from that. We're not in possession of a great ring. Now, you probably heard there's a kind of poetic analogy that I've heard. It's, well, poetic. I mean, really, it's kind of like a modern analog whereby we each as individuals can destroy the ring inside of us. So internally rid ourselves of greed, corruption, enmity, sinfulness, and so on, and live a virtuous life. And that's all well and good. But in the grand sense, what I mean ultimately is there is actually a great ring, albeit not manifest physically in a physical form that can actually be destroyed. It's symbolic and demonic in nature. We're not in a position where we have the means to just get rid of it yet. This is partly why I have mixed feelings about politics and trying to recapture institutional power, because it kind of like it reminds me of when Isildur gets the ring. All he has to do to end this evil is just drop it into the flames. But he just refuses, and himself becomes corrupted in the process. And then a new dark age just befalls them, followed by the inevitable return of Sauron, and everyone unalives and gets eaten by goblins. Now, maybe that's not directly analogous to our present situation, but I think honestly, Lord of the Rings is quite prophetic of us and where we are, what we have to do. I think it's laden with our mythos, our adventurous overcoming of a great foe. So, not to take it too much as gospel truth, I think it can somewhat guide us in our decisions, at least mythologically. Personally, I think if your inclination is towards politics, do so, but do so very, very carefully, because the halls of power these days are very dark indeed, and navigating your way around them is harder than trying to find your way around a Greek labyrinth, full of screaming banshees and medusas and other assorted pink-haired woke harpies. For me, a humble hobbit of the Shire, a fallen elf, I'm looking for an adventure, one in which we set the path for our own journey. There doesn't have to be immediate danger as is typical with dissident politics. Things like Samwise Gamgee and his kind of comical trepidation at the start of their great journey into the wild as going as far away from home as I've ever been, and he's like still inside the Shire. It's just a matter of trusting yourself, keep moving forwards, stepping maybe off the well-beaten path and going through roads and inlets less well trod. Say not dangerous. I mean, there's always the occasional ring wraith and hordes of goblins, but that aside, we're not going straight at the enemy here. We're moving around and taking cover. We're not aiming our swords at the strongest bulwarks of Mordor. We have other goals and other objectives. We're not directly necessarily a threat to the system. I think, first, we don't even have our own ring. We don't have our own Helm's Deep. We don't have our own Rivendell. We don't have Lothlorien. I guess we have the Shire, but the state it's in now would make Saruman Bloody Sharky weep with sorrow. I think we need our Redoubt. We need our Helm's Deep. We need our Rivendell. We need to fashion our own ring outside of the reaches of the One. We need to take control of our own destiny. And that's what I think we need to do. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. What I'm going to do, using this kind of magical symbolism, poetic allusions as a kind of spiritual kindling is, well, hopefully to go off grid eventually. Link, again, hopefully with like-minded people, like those partaking in the Woodlanders Initiative, and start to, bit by bit, take back our land and eventually rekindle the flame of Europe and make it in our image. And going back to the grand question of which way Western man, I mean, this idea of a great fork in the road, I mean, we've faced this many times in the past, but without really a good answer. I mean, the first schism, at least I believe in the Golden Era, was Plato simply asking why, and askance to that, Plato positing how, and never the twain really ever met. Socrates, the Socratic method, I don't believe ever really reconciled those two grand kind of magisteria. In many ways, I think they were just mostly non-overlapping. I think to a large extent, they were just irreconcilable, and the non-ent, the darkness that followed, ultimately not just killed Greece, but I think Europe lost its soul, effectively. And the first, I mean, see it as the first kind of canonical great schism. Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, Christianity that followed, I think, were kind of civilizational attempts to get our soul back with, I mean, think Dante's journey through hell to get to heaven, like the search for God. But this journey, the first steps of modern man, was ultimately a journey in which we'd already spiritually lost. I think personally the Holy Trinity is just kind of us, but lost in the ether. And God is a way of our broken minds to kind of fathom what is that which we've ultimately lost. Jesus, the prophetic figure Jesus, is you. It's us. He is our soul manifest, and it's gone. Which, of course, is why Christianity over the years faced schism after schism, denomination after denomination, to where Christianity is now just a kind of completely relativized, diluted, and fractured void of what it once was. And with a final revelation to boot, a final damnation, an end to the West with the trumpeting return of Jesus, and ultimately final judgment of man, and an end to everything. I mean, even in the nation's borders, in Europe, they look like a kind of just a fractured mess, divided peoples. Everything metaphysically about us is broken. Every Western schism, every irreconcilable binary is nothing more, I think, than what Guénon coined as a multiplicity of fragmentation. The entropic scattering of forms into a kind of degraded mass of non-being. But in and amongst the ruin, there was always Little England. The Angles, the angels who, above all, valued freedom. They manifested the Magna Carta. I mean, you've even got Braveheart in Scotland crying freedom to the heavens, for goodness sake. The Gothic darkness of our own cathedrals and leering gargoyles, I feel they kind of portend a kind of a dark yearning, sort of an abyssal cry, a Hegelian return to being and to freedom, to be or not to be. The reason we are dying is because collectively, I think we've just lost our souls. I mean, it is that catastrophic, the fate of Faustian man. For me, Western civilization is a 1,000-year dream. It's like a funereal elegy. Many of us are still asleep in our pods as Denethor lights his pyre, and we collectively commit spiritual, moral, and cultural suicide. But we can change this. England gave birth to the spirit of freedom with common law, with heady Arthurian legend. We have the power to take the sword from the stone where no one else can, where no one else has even imagined. We can do this. If you think ancient Greece is the pupa of Europe, and the kind of the modern West is the sleeping chrysalis, we potentially can become the butterfly, what was intended. We just need to believe in ourselves again, and maybe, just maybe, we can learn to fly. Thank you for watching.